Hello and welcome to AOH Primetime, and tonight a discussion about maybe the history of television news here in Akron, Ohio. And anyone that's been watching my show and the progress as we build WAOH television to serve Akron knows I am extremely passionate about the idea of local television here in Akron. And anyone that's been paying attention is probably sick of hearing the story about how I would have loved to have worked at the original TV-23, WAKC. And joining us right now to talk about how that went and how it ended, unfortunately, 30 years ago as we mark that milestone, we have Mark Williamson here on the set. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you for listening to me every time I tell the story. I say, I wanted to work for you. Oh. And I love my career, and it continues, of course, in corporate video and local television commercial production, everything that I get to be involved in. But I wanted to work at TV-23, and I wanted to work for you.
Well, I appreciate you saying it's very nice. I look back on those days, and I think, you know, as we get older, as we get more experience in life and anything we do, and you look back, you think of what you might have done differently and how you might have done things differently. And I still think that we really did that the right way, given all of the forces that we can talk about later maybe. But I mean, all the different things that made it a challenge, like a real challenge. But we hired people like you. We hired young people. Heck, I was young. I mean, I was news director when I was 28, I think, or something like that. And started there. I started anchoring news, I think I was 19 years old. And so everybody that we hired because of our budget was right out of college. Or maybe they had one job and this was their second job. And they had this great energy. They just loved the business. They understood that what we gave them was an opportunity. They were 1% proven ability and 99% potential. And all we want to do is flip that around, right? And I think that, I mean, most of those people went on and are still working in that business, or they've recently retired like I did, and did really, really well. So they got a good start, and it would have been great. I mean, it would have been great to have you there, because you would have ended up like being probably the operations director, or somebody running, or even the station manager, like, because you understand so much of the business. But unfortunately, 30 years ago, that made that impossible.
Does it surprise you that 30 years later, so we're sort of commemorating as the date has passed, that 30 years ago, the folks that bought TV-23 WAKC ended the nightly news here in Akron. A terrible day for you and so many others that were part of that operation, I know. And does it surprise you that 30 years later, that people still remember, identify you? I mention your name as we're building the TV station here, and I mention your name, and everybody goes, oh, yeah, of course. And I was talking with Tim Doherty just the other day, and he says, people see me and go, didn't you do the weather? Yeah. And it's like, or weren't you the weather? And how is it that we're talking 30 plus years ago, people still remember Phil Ferguson and the sports set and the big blue scoreboard, and Billy Soul with the Friday night music video show. Yeah. People remember. Yeah.
Well, it's local.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's what we don't have anymore, not just here. I mean, in the media, that's a whole other show of what's happened to the media, but that local interest in WAKR radio, starting in the 40s, and they were one of the best stations in the country at reaching their target audience, maybe the best, quite honestly. They knew exactly what people wanted. And if you heard a siren go down your street or somewhere nearby, you turn on that radio, and 20 minutes later, they told you what it was and where it was going, and if there was anything you needed to worry about. And that was radio's niche, because radio was mobile. You know, you took it with you where you went. It kept you posted. It didn't get into big, complicated. That isn't what people wanted. Well, television news could do the same thing, but a lot of the pressure from consultants, which we never used, you could probably tell by watching, but consultants, they've homogenized all the news. The stories are basically very often created by people in management who will look at their news staff and say, we need stories that women from 18 to 35 want to watch, because that's who we want to reach. And we just said, what's news? What's happening? We didn't have any restrictions on what we covered and what was news, and we certainly didn't try to tailor stories for a certain demographic. That's ridiculous. Well, it really worked because the feedback that we got from people, and still today, as you mentioned, if you look on Facebook, people say, I really miss that. In hindsight, they can look back now because they don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
And you could see your friends on TV. Now, sometimes it wasn't great. Sometimes, like I was doing a story one night, and they were marching some prisoners in Summit County, Orange, through the courthouse, and as I'm reading it, I looked and I saw this guy, and I almost like, hey, I went to school with him. But you'd see your friends and your neighbors, maybe where you work, or sometimes the news wasn't great, but it was that local aspect of it is what, it's undeniable that people want that.
Let me reframe it here, in case you're just joining us. I have saved this in the archives, and I didn't even work there. As I said, this was life-changing for me because I loved this whole. I love TV-23, and I love the idea of someday, as I was probably 22, 23 when this years old, and thinking that this is where I would like to have been an employee shooting the news, let's say. And so when this happened, I saved this in the archives. And to reframe it here, we are here exactly pretty much 30 years ago. This happened, and we just commemorated this terrible milestone, let's say. And take us back to, you just said you were very fortunate to get into TV news in your hometown, and where you went to school, Firestone High School, born and raised in Akron, all of it, West Akron, grew up, and you
provincial story,
right, and you got to be the news anchor and news director for the TV station in your hometown. Just a dream come true.
Yeah, it was great, and it was locally owned. I mean, that's the thing that you really don't see anymore now, but it was a local family that lived right up the street.
Sure.
And the father and then the grandfather had started it, and he was no longer around when I came around, but their dad was, Roger Burke Sr. was still around, and he'd come into the station, and there was always that sense of not just history, but responsibility. You were always reminded of being responsible to the community. So if you did a story that was irresponsible, let's say you did like you made a mistake on something, or maybe you just did something, it happens. And
sure.
He might come in the next day and he wouldn't scream, but he would say, here's my concern. His neighbors, people he knew, might come to him and say, gee, Roger, those kids you have over there are. So he always found out if something went wrong, and he or his sons, Roger and Bob, would come in and have a conversation with us about something we did. And we would right the ship. We would correct our course. So it was like ground up, sort of mom and pop, homegrown, and we liked hiring local people like Phil Ferguson, as people that were on there that were from around here who had an audience with them. Phil had done radio for a while. I had done radio for a while. So you're bringing people with you from where you grew up, from the school you went to, so you get that audience, right? But you can't mess it up either, right? As there's a lot riding on that. And I think we hired the right people. We had terrific videographers and editors, and some people that were incredibly talented. Some came from other places, like a guy named Jim Camber came from Connecticut, and he was wonderful, talented, brilliant guy, great journalist. And so we threw all those people into the mix, and for about 10 years, from maybe like 1981 to 1991, we had like almost no turnover. And in that business, that's unheard of.
Because everybody wants to launch in Akron and then go to Cleveland or go to a larger market. You start in Youngstown or Steubenville and you go to Pittsburgh, kind of thing.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, and we had a number of people leave and go to, like Mark Johnson with Channel 5, and Mark Nolan is up there now doing stuff. And a number of, and I apologize, I don't remember everybody, but and some of those folks I hired while they were still in college.
Oh, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, they only have a few
you
months
find the
of
rising
graduation.
stars,
Right.
and they have the hunger and the passion and the drive.
Yep.
And okay, so right here on the air, I'm going to pick your brain. I would love to do this, certainly. I feel Akron should have its own television newsroom. I would love to see that happen in my lifetime. I think it could happen. But give me the secret formula for making local news work, specifically in Akron. And I'm talking about right here, you're the best consultant we could possibly have on how to make it work. What did you do to connect with the viewers? You were saying earlier that you couldn't prove it in the books. You couldn't prove it in the Nielsen ratings,
Right.
or however it was all rigged to get as the catch-23 that Cleveland dominated, and in the shadow of Cleveland, you just couldn't prove on paper. Right. But you knew it was connecting with the community. The ownership, as you just said, was so deeply entrenched and connected in the community. They had empathy for every person that was upset with a mistake.
They did.
And what was your magic formula as the news director, and even as the anchor and news director? And I don't remember how your career went exactly, what titles you had and when, but how did you make it work? And I would adopt however you did it back then is exactly how I would want to do it today.
Well, we were honest, and we were honest about being honest, because a lot of news operations will talk to you about how forthright they are, how honest they are, but if you work in the business, you know who's doing what, and they left this out, they embellished this, and we had other names for it that I can't use here, but things that people in TV news would do to get just, and I have some stories, I mean, I could share one with you that would probably explain this really well, but we had integrity. Now, we were really low budget, so sometimes our production values weren't like what you have here. We had issues sometimes, right? Some of our equipment was older, sometimes things would go wrong. Cleveland had like the great lighting and the makeup, and they had people that helped with clothing and a budget for people to bind on their hair and the whole thing, right? We didn't do any of that. So we were kind of policing ourselves and figuring out how to do that part. So aesthetically, we may not have been the cereal that you bought at the store. We were in the brown box that just said news, right? It didn't have anything else. No other identifying marks to it, right? But the cereal was really, really good inside if you took the big chance to buy it, open it up, and eat it, right? So there was an occasion where we had a teacher at an Akron school who had been accused by a middle school student of doing some unseemly things and was arrested. And this was maybe the first time I can remember a story like this coming out. And it was a big deal, and it was kind of a big mess. And I told our reporters, we are not going to mention this until and unless this thing's adjudicated, right? And
Sure.
if the person's convicted, right? And we had a discussion in the newsroom. A lot of people said, yeah, but all the other stations are going to have this guy going to court. And I said, yeah, but think about it. What if he's innocent? I mean, a 13 or 14-year-old kid might make something up about
Sure.
somebody, right? And then their life is ruined.
The court of public opinion is
Terrible.
Terrible.
Terrible. And this happened. There are thousands of these stories all from around the country where people's reputations.
Your career's over.
Career's over.
Sure.
You got to pick up and move somewhere else.
Yep.
And so we didn't run the story of his arrest and of his court appearance. And boy, were we taking it. People were calling us up saying you're in cahoots with Akron schools and you're protecting and you're blah, blah, blah. One of the people that called was Conrad Ott, who was the superintendent of schools, who said to me, I should have known an Akron Public Schools graduate would understand right from
Yes.
wrong, and do the right thing,
Wow.
and not, because turns out the guy was not guilty.
Wow.
And he moved. He had to move. His
Sure.
reputation was ruined, even though he was not guilty. And Mr. Ott called me to tell. I said, could you put it on a billboard or something? Because we're getting killed here, right? Because we did the right thing. But people didn't really know we did the right. They didn't look at it that way. They thought that we were a step behind. Well, that's Channel 23. They don't know what they're doing. Right in your own backyard.
And Cleveland has it first, or has it, and you don't.
And they promote. You know how they promote stories. Their promotion of stories tends to run longer than the stories themselves, right?
Sure.
So we took a huge hit from that. But we had a discussion about it in the newsroom, and we all decided this is how we're going to do this. And the owner was thrilled, the Burke family was thrilled that they had people with integrity. And I said, that's what we need to promote. And we never really did that. We didn't really have a promotional, like a budget to promote what we did, which I was at odds with them at times about that. But that's what you promote. News for people that want news with integrity. People that want honesty. And who are you going to trust? Somebody from Cleveland or somebody who lives here with you in your hometown? if we could have promoted it that way, and I had some pretty good ideas. I was going to call it News for Smart People, and and I was going to like show a Cleveland newsroom from the back, the back of the heads of people sitting there, and all their TV monitors were turned to Channel 23, right? To see, because that's how they got their Akron news.
Sure.
Either that or the newspaper. They would see the paper and they would run out and cover whatever was on the front page of the paper.
Sure.
Because people in Cleveland, they don't know. They
Right.
don't know. They have no idea that
Right.
it was in the Beacon Journal. So they have what a deal. You've got a television station in Cleveland that has a news source in Akron that they don't even give you the idea. They write the story. They name the sources. You just go and you talk to the people they talk to. You put it on TV, and 85% of your audience doesn't have a clue.
Wow.
So that's the hard part.
And one of my favorite quotes related to the idea of Akron versus Cleveland, and Eric Mansfield lived it because he worked at TV-23. And maybe you hired him, and he's only a few years older than me, so if he came in 91, 92, 90, in college probably, and then worked at Channel 3, and then was the anchor when Channel 3 News decided to, as part of PAX,
Right.
do the broadcast from downtown Akron in the year 2000, 2001, in that era.
Yep.
And somebody asked Eric Mansfield, what's the difference between working for the Akron TV station and then TV news in Cleveland? And you know what his response was? Nicer shoes.
Yeah, that's
It's
good.
the only difference.
That's good.
They got nicer shoes.
Yeah.
And that was his
it's
line.
And it's true. And I helped put that station together at 1 North Main Street, or
Yes.
1 South Main Street. And
And
a Beacon Journal reporter said to me, "How's it feel?" Because I'm standing there as the Beacon's covering the story of
Are you
the
working
opening
for
of the
Don
station.
Pasqualik at
Yep.
this time? You're the communications director for Don Pasqualik,
Right.
and you're helping Channel 3 come back to rebuild
Right.
TV-23 or a newscast in Akron.
Exactly. And the mayor was instrumental in helping make that happen.
Sure.
I'm standing there, and a reporter said to me, he said, how does this feel, standing here doing this for them? I said, I feel like I'm, how do I say it? It's like, something about my ex-wife's paying for my ex-wife's next wedding or something like that. I don't have an ex-wife, but I thought this must be how it feels, because this is what I should be doing.
Well, I was going to
right?
say, he was asking you because you should be doing it. You
Yeah.
should be.
Yeah, I mean,
Channel 3 should have said, you're the news anchor for this.
Well, and I almost got hired by Channel 3, and 23 wouldn't let me go. And I couldn't get out of my non-compete in my contract years ago, and which was nice that they thought enough of me to want to keep me hanging
Sure.
around. But and that's fine. It's everything goes the way it's supposed to go, quite honestly. But when the station blew up, there was like 85 of us lost our jobs, like right now in one day, without any advance
That's in
warning
here
at
in
all.
this article. I cannot believe how many people that station employed.
Yeah.
And what it took to put all that together.
Yeah, there were about 100 people, and I think 15 stayed, mostly off-air people stayed.
Unbelievable.
But it was a shock. But people were pretty young and hadn't been through anything like that, and I think they thought, well, we'll just. And most of them did. They landed on their feet. They didn't have a mortgage. They didn't have a family yet. I
Sure.
did, and a few of us did, and that's it puts you in a little bit different position. But the way that Paxson did that is like an HR don't. That's just never the way you do something.
We could talk about this for hours. One of the biggest challenges in putting together a local TV station here is figuring out how to get sponsors and pay the bills. So
Yep.
on that topic, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to do a quick commercial break. We are here with Mark Williamson commemorating what is not such a great day in broadcast history in Akron, with a discussion about exactly 30 years ago, TV-23's nightly newscast ended here in Akron. And big shoes to fill and a huge void still here in Akron. And we're going to continue our discussion with Mark Williamson on that topic when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back to AOH Primetime, as I'm having a blast, certainly very passionate about the idea of local television, and no better guest to speak to on this topic, the idea of local television, than Mark Williamson. Thank you for taking the time
Sure, thank you.
to come in and let's just hash through it. There's a huge void when 30 years ago, at about almost to the day here, that TV-23 killed the news. And there is a huge void, I believe, and I know that you share this feeling, that local television connects with the audience, with the community, with what's happening. And you would describe in one of the articles you wrote about how all the things that happened in downtown Akron and in Akron in the 96, 97, 98 that would have made incredible local television stories, and there was no camera to cover it.
All the things that Mayor Pasqualik did after the station blew up would have been, because we were hard pressed some days, right, trying to come up with news.
Sure.
And a lot of the problem was we didn't do entertainment. I mean, that wasn't our thing really. We kind of just covered daily news. But when the mayor built, the convention center, the
Canal
ballpark,
sure.
Inventors Hall of Fame, he started to do some things and brought a law firm downtown into the old O'Neill's building, and just some really, Tony Tropy was doing some things with historic preservation. As I was working in the mayor's office at the time, all I could think about was, wow, if I were in my old job right now, we would have an endless source of, we could do a whole show, basically like a weekly show about the growth of downtown Akron and things that were happening in downtown Akron. It would have been great.
If social media had existed at that era of your life, in 96, 97, 98, certainly well before YouTube, Facebook, because the mayor's office now, the city of Akron, puts out news on their platform.
Right.
So they are press releases to themselves, and then they do a story, and that's a wonderful service to the community.
It is.
But there's something different about that. And could you imagine what if you had done that or had those platforms? What would that have looked like? If you had social media and you were running Don Pasqualik's Facebook page, which...
Well...
I mean, if social media had existed while Don Pasqualik was mayor, and what they're doing now in putting the Akron news, at least from the mayor's office, was, I think, a good thing. But there's obviously they don't have journalists in that perspective. They have to. They're pretty close to it.
Yeah.
How would that have gone?
Well, it's a two-edged sword, Dan. I mean, you've got social media is a it's good because you can promote things. It's bad if you're promoting things because people can come on and say things that are derogatory, detrimental, hateful, racist.
But you got those in letters and calls to the station when you worked there.
But the public didn't see it. So now, and I see that it really well-intentioned people that are doing good work and working really hard are just eviscerated by Joe Sixpack, from
the keyboard warrior in the basement of the house in the unsavory neighborhood.
Everybody's voice is as loud as everybody's voice. So there is no delineation between with that. I mean, George Will could write something and say, "Oh, that guy's," it doesn't matter. So what we've done is we have, and this is a whole thing about journalism that I think is worth a book probably, but. We have taken the profession of journalism and we have almost completely minimized it to a point where people feel like anybody can do that, right? Why you went to college for that?
I have a Facebook page. I can just do this.
And now that people don't have to be able to write because they can use AI, perhaps you don't, because that was always the thing that separated the pros from the amateurs was how good their writing was. And we've lost not just the quality of the work, but we've lost the ability to tell good from not good. As a society, we now lump it's all together. It's all in one thing. And, Fox News could be on and it's entertainment. It's not news. They don't have to be news. They're cable. They can do whatever they want, right? And people say, yeah, well, MS Now is just as bad, CNN is just as bad. They're not. They're not. And you may not have wanted to go here in this discussion.
You go anywhere you'd like.
But the difference is the DNA of Fox News. It's in its DNA. It's bylaws, whatever you want, is to promote a certain cause. That's their reason for being there. When Roger Ailes created it, that was their reason, to get more people to lean to the conservative side. You don't see that with CNN or MS Now. Journalists, by their very nature, have always been liberal because they're for change. They're not for status quo. And change tends to be liberal, not conservatives. That all makes sense. So you had people that were watchdogs. And when you get rid of the watchdogs who are skeptical, who will go into a mayor's office, into the White House, into the State House with an eyebrow raised and say, wait a minute, you expect me to believe, like Sam Donaldson, right? One eyebrow goes up and it arches says, do you expect the public to believe that, right? Well, we don't have it anymore. We have people now that just kind of write what they're given. And we have people in government who know that. And so they just give them crap. And it comes out the other side.
Your father-in-law was the editor of the Beacon Journal. Or what title did he have?
He was the editor.
Editor at the Beacon Journal. While you were what title did you have at TV-23 News at that time?
Right before I started at 23, and he left before I got started.
There wasn't an overlap. Okay, that would have been an interesting situation if you were the news director at the TV news station.
He probably didn't like television news.
So the editor of the Beacon Journal didn't like TV news.
Well, he was steeped in print journalism.
Sure.
Their family was, Pulitzer Prize-winning people that worked for the Bingham family in Louisville, Kentucky for the Courier-Journal and Newsday on Long Island, and big papers and overseas in Europe, and his dad was an ambassador for Truman and Roosevelt. I mean, these are people that do their stuff. And here we had him in Akron running the Beacon Journal because John Knight handpicked him to do that job.
Wow.
The people that ran that newspaper were really good. And you look at the people, and I wish I would have thought of this, but a list of who left the Beacon, who's out in the world that you get to read books, novels, sports, Chris Broussard, people that are on ESPN, people that have really done some wonderful things, started or had at some point in time worked at the Akron Beacon Journal. And I remember people who said, I wish that paper would go away. And I said, don't wish for that.
Sure.
You don't want to wish for local news to go away because what you have is people in power who just do whatever they want because nobody's watching anymore.
You believe that the nightly newscast and the news made the community stronger in terms of working together. You need both of them. Well, and you were before we went on the air, you were talking about some of the numbers at the Beacon that you knew that how many subscribers and how many pages describe that. I mean, everybody knows, obviously, but you had a different perspective because you heard the numbers all the time.
They had hundreds of thousands, several 100,000 subscribers at one point in time. And now they're down into double digits.
Sure.
I mean, they're down probably below 20,000.
It's a trend across the nation, and obviously not just in
right.
Akron,
It's not
Ohio.
just
Sure.
absolutely. Because look, people listen to this statistic. People 18 to 38, 68, I think to 68 to 78%, sorry, never watch live television. Now, if I owned a TV station,
that's a problem.
I'm looking down the road at my audience of the future. I'm going, wait a minute. It doesn't matter what I put on this station. They're not watching it. I mean, why would I watch the weather? Why would I watch the sport? I mean, I look at my phone. So everything is on demand now. So if the future of television, as we know it today, in my mind, they've got to be somewhat scared, I think.
Sure.
We've seen it, the newspapers have gone through it. Radio is certainly not at all what it used to be. AM radio is really struggling, but the landscape's changed in our lifetime, and we've been right in the middle of it as it's happened.
You were news director at TV-23 at the time. 30 years ago, when the nightly newscast ended, your title was news director. I'll do another, in case you're just joining us today here on the broadcast, AOH Primetime. We are commemorating a not-so-good day in the Akron media television history 30 years ago when the company that bought TV-23 killed the nightly newscast. And our guest here, of course, Mark Williamson, who was the news director at that time, and bringing us to what we would say in terms of that day, probably one of the worst HR moments for any company.
And PR.
You have just said before we went on the air that in PR and all of it just handled about as poorly as anything could have possibly been handled from every aspect. Yeah. And share with us that day and just what happened.
Well, and here behind the scenes too, Bud Paxson came up one time. That's a wealthy Floridian who owned PAX TV and started the home shopping club, and that was his thing. But he came up to and purchased the station 6 months before he took over, before it was official, which was the 30th, the day that he took over. It blew up. He came in 6 months before that and met with the whole staff. And he gave this whole presentation about caring about the community and local news, and we're going to invest more money, and we're going to go after Cleveland, and we're going to do, and he went through this whole thing. And really what I suspicioned at the time and what ended up being true was that he just did that to keep anybody from jumping ship. So he protected his investment by most of the young people that were in the newsroom being excited to stay. And then we were all kicking ourselves that we ever believed this guy. And Mayor Pasqualik went down and met with him, and he Don, very
Mayor
direct,
Pasqualik met
honest,
with him after he killed the news.
right? And he gave him an earful, right? And that was and I give Don a lot of credit because that's just his nature. I shouldn't give him credit because he's that kind of guy. He's very forthright, and he was upset, and he just told him. And I think at that time, Paxton, what we all learned was he didn't care. He didn't care. And we had never experienced like an ownership, like.
You had the Burke family that loved Akron and loved the broadcast business and was very passionate about all of it. Then to go to this, the worst possible ownership scenario you could ever imagine.
If they were driving to work and they saw somebody struggling with something or something bad happened, they would call us, we'd call whoever, and it would, they cared about this guy didn't care at all. So this was the indoctrination for a lot of young people as to what the future was. Corporate television.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah, it really was.
Sure.
It was a great lesson and learned the hard way. But the PR on it, they didn't even tell me, and I was the news director. They didn't say to me, "Hey, look, you need to know," because I was out covering a story. I actually came in early and went out with the camera guy, Tim Coffey, to cover something. I spoke at a luncheon. And a group of a women's
viewers.
luncheon, I think.
A group of viewers.
And didn't know. I'm driving back in, and Tim said, "Hey, you should call the station, tell them we're on our way back in." I said, "Yeah, you're right." So I get on the two-way radio, and nobody answers. So I called the switchboard, and there was voicemail. And I said, "I've been here a long time. We've never had voicemail. We always had
A live
Hazel
operator answering.
or Isabel Summer at the switchboard.
They were the
always.
face of the station on the telephone.
I said, something's not right. This doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Well, they had been fired. The switchboard people, everybody had been fired. And so we pulled in the parking lot, and people are walking out with boxes with all their stuff in them. And that's where Steve Litz, the reporter, said, "Oh, yeah, they told me to go around and tell all my friends that we were all fired." That's how they fired everybody. They had one reporter, really good reporter.
And how old is this reporter? He's not an intern or a young person. He was a reporter.
Probably 27, maybe.
Okay.
26, 27. Steve was a great guy. I think he ended up
Still
doing
a
pretty
little
well.
early in his career, and his assignment now is to go around and tell everyone at TV-23 News,
Yeah.
you're all fired.
And the guy on the front page, Dean Goodman, the guy in that picture, was the guy that came in as like the hatchet man, right? And they had armed guards there to make sure we didn't steal anything. I'm thinking, what do we got?
What, you got to take the tapes?
do
They
you
don't
s-
even want you to make a demo reel.
It was so, but the message is, we don't matter. They don't care. And I thought, wow, this is really awful. And there's no union, obviously. There was no conscience. It was just this, come in and tell everybody to leave because we got work to do here, and it doesn't include any of you. We're not doing news anymore. And I'm reading the article as you brought in, and
Sure.
I'm looking at it, and there's quotes in there from this guy Goodman, and he's talking about, we're going to reevaluate. You don't reevaluate. You had a news staff. You had people in place. You had 35 people doing, working in news. Maybe
There's no
40.
coming back from this because
Yeah.
no one would trust you. No one would come to work for you after you did this.
Right.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
We're gonna in the next segment we're gonna talk a little bit about how it was working for Mayor Don.
Oh, good.
Those stories are always great.
Yeah.
Mark Williamson, our guest here on AOH Primetime tonight, as we revisit that day in Akron television news history 30 years ago, when the new ownership came in, bought TV-23, and then killed the nightly newscast. Certainly for all of those of us who love local media and local television, certainly a dark day, a lousy day in the history of Akron. And we'll be back with more with Mark Williamson right after this. Welcome back to AOH Primetime, as we have Mark Williamson joining us tonight to talk about TV-23 News. Of course, people, I'm sure, stop you and say, hey, I remember. Here we are 30 years almost to the day that WAKC ended news, and even 30 years later, people still certainly remember, and they bring it up. Every time I see it, I bring it up, certainly. And, if you had it to do all over again, certainly, if you had a crystal ball that says this is how this is going to go, you would have stayed in it anyway. You loved the idea of local television news, and you loved what you did. And best thing ever, a great era of your life.
It was. And, it's funny, the night that Paxson took over on like the 28th, I think, at midnight. And
this is 6 months before the news was killed. Bud Paxson bought TV-23.
Right, but the day that it ended, when everybody was fired, back up to midnight, right? So we did the news at 11 o'clock the night before, 27th. I'm standing in the parking lot. It was February, obviously, and it was unusually warm, like upper 40s. And I'm in the parking lot talking to the producer, Chris Heiser, who's now at Kent State. And he was at Channel 8 for many years. So Chris is a great guy, and he and I were talking, and clock chimed 12, it's midnight, we're in the parking lot, and all of a sudden this got cold. And he kind of shut. I said, wow, that's weird. It's like all of a sudden it's like cold front came in, and it was just standing right. You can't miss it. We're out in the middle of this parking lot. And he goes, wow, that's really. I said, that's Bud Paxson. That's what it's 12 o'clock. He now owns this place. That means something. I said, and I have a feeling it's not good. Wow. And the next day, he came up to me. He goes, well, this is your fault. You shouldn't have said anything about that, But it was just one of those moments. I thought, all the things that happened, I look back on it and the way it happened. And look, I really believe that things do happen the way they're supposed to happen. It's how we respond to life that makes the big difference in where we go. And you can kind of point your sail where you want to point it. And the wind's going to do what it does, but you run the boat and the sails. And so that gave everybody an opportunity in a very Zen way. That was an opportunity for all those people to go out, take what they learned in the incubator, and go make the most of your life. And some people went into financial planning, some people went into insurance, some people did all kinds of different things. Covering news gives you a pretty good background in a lot of areas. Television news, I would say the problem with TV news is people can tend to be like a mile wide and an inch deep, right? Because it's really, a lot of times you're just scratching the surface of things. Whereas like with newspaper people, they do a lot of digging, deep. Right?
Sure.
So when I was at home, thinking about what was next in my life and whether I stay in TV, and if I did, I'd have to move somewhere. And the phone rang, and it was the chief of staff for Mayor Pasqualik, and it was Joel Bailey who called me up, and he said, "Hey, the mayor's interested in hiring you. We don't have a communications director." And so, and Don, being Don, he's one of the first things he said. He says, "I never really like you a lot." I mean, it's like, because you're.
But you knew where you stood.
Right. Always.
Never
always,
any gray. You knew
always,
where you stood.
Always. He was terrific, and he was really direct. But he just basically said, "I don't like reporters," and I said, "I know that. But I need somebody that knows what he's doing here." I said, "Okay, that's fair. That's fair." And so I started there, and it was great because I really worked for somebody who said what he meant what he said. You rarely misunderstood him. I mean, I don't know how you could misunderstand him because he was not. He was just very direct and blunt. And being the person that managed his messaging and PR, if you want to call it that, my job was to deal with some of the things that he would say and do. But the easy part was, he meant it. He said it. He meant it.
There was no clarifying. You
No.
did not have to clarify.
You
But I
didn't
can
lie.
remember working a couple of press events back in the day, and you would be listening. You would have this pose where you'd hear the reporter would be questioning him, but you would just be right there listening, just to keep tabs on what he was telling that reporter.
Yeah, and there were some great moments from those news conferences, things that he would say to reporters. And some of the reporters I still know and I run into once in a while, like Mark Williamson, who was at WKSU, and we'll talk about some of those great press conferences. And one of my favorites was when Mike Aganis bought the baseball team, and he named them
The Akron Arrows.
Well, he named them the Akron Blast.
Okay.
And we had news conference.
This is
at
90.
Canal
This
Park.
is okay.
He's
This
just-
is the
yeah.
very. It was originally before it was the Arrows. It was the Akron Blast for a second.
For a second, because I looked at Joel, chief of staff, and I said, we can't call them the Blast because it was to commemorate the space shuttle and the space program.
I never knew
That was-
this.
yeah,
but
aeronautics.
That's not a good name.
Well, no, because he invoked Judy Resnick's name.
Oh,
that's-
no, yeah,
But see,
okay.
to him, he, I think, thought of Blast as like...
Paying a tribute and honoring.
Well,
or,
and there's a blast and it
okay,
blasts off,
sure,
right? Blasts
yeah.
off. But
No.
being like a PR I thought, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then he said, and here's the new mascot, and the mascot's name was Kaboom.
No.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I'm looking at the mayor, and he's looking at me like.
No.
So after that, we got together, the mayor and Joel and I, and we got to figure out we got to get out of this. We got to get out of this.
Mm-hmm.
And we did. I'm not sure what he said to Mike Aganis. He and Mike Aganis didn't see eye to eye. That's putting it kind of mildly, but I'm not sure what he said to Aganis about changing the name. But all you had to really say was, you're from Connecticut, you don't understand. This Judy Resnick was a beloved person, like a real hero.
Sure.
So incredible,
Absolutely.
amazing human being, not just scientist, but she was brilliant and a good person. And so we did. So we were able to we did a community poll. Send in your ideas, and Joel and I sat down with hundreds and hundreds of little pieces of paper with ideas on them.
And the Akron Arrows was in there somewhere.
Akron Arrows was in there somewhere.
Wow.
And I thought, that's good. That's aerospace. It's it's Arrows. It's not ARROWS. It's different. It's kind of
Sure.
cool. We checked to see who else. I think there was a hockey team in Houston maybe that had the same name, so we went with it. And then the mascot became Orbit, which I thought was a nice Orbit.
That I
Not
never knew
Kaboom.
this.
Yeah.
This is why we do this. We want to hear the stories. Speaking of stories, you have an incredible life journey, resume, all of this, in that you have worked for You've worked for the good and the bad. You have, all of us, especially in business, people say if you want to start your own business, go work for somebody that does something in that industry well, and then work for somebody that does it poorly, take notes and adjust as needed and start a business. But you have worked for characters and people that have, and you've survived, and you have the thick skin to, as they said, if this person didn't care for me, or this person has an issue with something I said or did or wrote, and you still like the person. In that kind of, you just got to go with it. You can't please everybody.
Well, if they're honest, like the Burke family, they were honest.
Sure.
Sometimes they would tell us, things that we didn't like. And look, we're kids. I mean, we're learning. What they understood was we just hired a whole bunch of young people. The liability, like those people were brave.
Oh, sure.
We're going to leave this to a bunch of kids to put a newscast
Got a 19-year-old news anchor.
6 and 11 o'clock every night. You guys are in charge of this thing, right? I mean, oh my gosh, I think of some of the close calls we had and things like
Misspellings are just the beginning.
just the beginning. So,
But you've worked for people like the Burks that were incredible and genuinely cared about the community.
Yeah.
And then you worked for people that it was a little more about them, let's say.
Value Vision bought us before PAX. So the Burks sold it to Value Vision, they're from Eden Prairie, Minnesota, and they were a home shopping club.
And they were going to keep the news
company.
going, and they were going to be a decent operator, and they were okay.
Right, except the guy they brought in, the general manager they brought in, was not an okay guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what he knew that he didn't tell anybody was that he wanted to build it up and to sell it. He wanted to make it worth more and then sell it. We didn't know that. He made it seem that they were in it for the long run, and we were naive enough to believe this guy. But he lived in Washington, D.C. He never moved here. He didn't stay in a hotel here. He commuted every day. As God is my witness, every single day he
Wow.
commuted. He flew to Cleveland Hopkins Airport every morning,
Wow.
rented a car, drove to Akron every day. I've never seen for 2 years.
That's got to be a 4 hours of your day just getting to Akron to run TV-23.
And just to mess with people, he would call a meeting on a Saturday, like on late Friday night. And he'd fly back on a Saturday and make all the managers come in from their day off with their kids and stuff. And he just told them, well, you can either have a family or you can do this. I mean, he was, I mean, it was amazing the guy survived, quite honestly, because there were people there that wanted to just fold him up and stuff him in the dumpster.
And still not the worst situation you'd ever have to live through in an still not the worst employer or
Well, he
most
said
difficult.
we had a meeting with all the managers and I was still news director at the time, and then I found somebody to take my place. And I said, look, I just want to be Ted Baxter. I don't want to be Lou Grant and Ted Baxter. And so, but we had a meeting, and I never was good at hiding, still not, at how I feel about things.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, in work and business, sometimes that's kind of a liability.
Sure.
So we're sitting there, there's like 15 of us, and he was, and I was thinking, man, this guy doesn't get it. He's way out there. And he said, you know, Mr. Williamson, I get the feeling that I'm putting too much on your plate. I said, oh, no, it's not about quantity. I just don't like what you're trying to feed me. That's what I said, right? And everybody looked at me like, right? And so, you know, from that moment on, he made my life miserable, right? It was his way of saying, oh, you should try to show me up. And, okay. So for the next 2 years, I'd say for the first year of it, there was this like honeymoon period, and you know, and they put a little more money here and there, and they hired some consultant to come in from Dallas who rebranded us, and the term branding wasn't around back then, but they called us the North Ohio News Station.
I remember
to which I
that.
said to him,
they changed the graphics and the graphics package and the look and feel of everything.
Yeah. And I said, are we covering Toledo now? And he looked at me like, you know, smart aleck, right?
From out of town, they don't know it's Northeast Ohio, number one.
It's really North Central Ohio, quite honestly. But I mean, but anyway, you know, I said, look, you got a bunch of kids in the newsroom. We could have done this for nothing. You paid somebody $85,000 in 1993
to change the color of the graphics
and call us North Ohio News. It was just bad. So, you know, but I had the feeling that he was trying to dress the place up, and sure enough, starting in the year before, 1 year before he sold it, he began firing salespeople, one a month. One a month. And we only had like 6 or 7 salespeople. And he would increase their quota every month, and they couldn't reach it. It was unreachable, and so he'd fire them. What he knew that we didn't know was that he was going to sell the station, and he would take all those accounts and he would manage them by phone, basically, because these people had done all the work to, you know, to create these.
He could just be an order taker, and there you go.
Exactly, and he probably made a lot of money. I'm thinking a lot of money. Our program director at the time sort of assessed what he made on a weekend in just commissions, and it was astounding. And so we started thinking, you know, why is letting all the salespeople go? We can't do this without salespeople. And so 2 months after the last salesperson was gone, came the news that we're being purchased by somebody else. So that was another lesson, right? There's a lesson. Watching these people do business, the opposite of the Burke family. The opposite. The Burke family was everything okay with your family? Is there anything you need? You know, Roger Burke, there was the old Jim's Bike Shop, which was next door to us on Copley Road, had become a daycare center, and the back of it was overgrown weeds and cracked asphalt with some playground equipment on it. And Roger he couldn't believe it. He said, he probably doesn't want me telling
Roger
the story.
Senior.
Roger Jr.
Roger Jr.
And he had children, and he thought, this is terrible. Kids can't play back there. And he quietly went, and he went to Little Tykes, and he spent a lot of money, and he basically built, and it was anonymous. He gave them this and said, build a playground, make the best playground you can. If you need more, let me know.
The daycare is the neighbor to the TV station. Yeah. He anonymously, quietly donated a playground for kids.
Right, and he didn't want anyone to know that he did that, right? And we all thought that he was just kind of a difficult guy, you know, because he had to be. He had a tough job. But so we went from working with people, as you said earlier, who had a conscience about the community, really cared about the employees. Get this figure. When Tim Doherty's daughter was born, my daughter was born, we had 18 children born in 1989. 18 kids, and we were all first-time parents. We were self-insured. They paid for every childbirth. 18. They paid for all that.
Wow.
They paid for that, right? So, yes. And I think our insurance back then was like $12 a month or something. I was like, But so we went from that to this guy, right? Like, and then Bud Pasqualik. So there was this de-evolution. We went from this to all the way down here. But what they made us think was that we were going to be going up. That we're going to increase our profile. We're going to spend money finally on marketing and promotion, and we're going to hire some get better equipment and all that. And we all believed them. And then we realized, and that shaped everybody that's still in television today or who recently retired, maybe. That really shaped. They all have told me the rest of their career that shaped it. They were very cautious. They did not believe everything somebody told them. Right, that was their lesson.
I am so fortunate that as I build this, my passion project, building a TV station, using all the technology, the Roku and Apple TV and all that we're doing, that I can call you and you'll come in and share these stories, be an unofficial consultant. Glad you stayed in Akron. And I'll wrap up with this, as we could talk about this for, we could do a 3 or 4 hour telethon and raise money to do this idea. But we won't even talk about the telethons. But the idea, you could have gone anywhere. You could have gone you could have launched, and as you said, you looked around to go to Cleveland even or anywhere. But you stayed in Akron even after the TV-23 news ended. And why? And no regrets, perhaps.
No.
And you stayed in your hometown. You're glad you did. And things you experienced working for Don Pasqualik, working as the spokesperson for the Akron Public Schools. Certainly, a lot of challenges in every. You stayed with it. And Mayor Don, wrote somebody writes a letter or says something bad about him, he resigns, and you didn't. Or at times you could have said, I've had enough of all of this.
Yeah,
but you stayed with it and stuck with everything you did.
I'm stubborn. And my dad said to me, he said, are you just trying to prove that you can put up with more, I'll just say, crap than anybody else?
Sure.
And I said, I don't know, maybe. I don't know what it is, but I'm not an easy, I'm not easily discouraged by anything. And I guess I just sort of feel that in life we all have choices, and my mom and dad were up there in years. They were older when they had us, and my family, my daughters, I wanted them near their grandparents. That's all it was to me, was we're not going anywhere because that. And to this day, my parents both lived to be pretty close to 100, and my kids carry pictures of them and talk about them, and idolize. And I thought, you know what? That's all that matters, right? Yeah. They have we didn't move to Arizona and, call them once every couple of months or something. I mean, I just didn't believe in that, and now the reward is that they're gone. My daughters just they talk about them all the time, and that means everything to me.
Wow.
So. That's more than career.
Thank you for coming on.
Sure.
Sharing. Again, we could talk about this, and we could talk about, there's certainly a lot of other things. For us to stay focused on this, the TV-23 there's all kinds of places we could go. But certainly, again, I appreciate that you're willing to come in and share the stories. Anytime. And I'll share with you as we wrap up the challenge that is finding sponsorship, getting the community to support local television or local newspaper, advertise in the paper, advertise on local radio. Right. It's all being diverted to digital, YouTube, spending money on ads, and then spending money all over, everywhere but local media. Right. And the final thing I'll hit you with is, how do you make it work? And you faced this. You always called the catch-23 of being in the shadow of Cleveland. How do we make it work?
I think that the model has to be something similar to almost like a fledgling internet news service, right? That you start to take and put video with the stories. Yeah. But the difference between the way it's being done by some people now and the way it needs to be done is it has to be consistently branded. It has to be serious. It has to just be local. It shouldn't do anything other than that.
Yeah.
And if you give people all the things that WAKR did in the 50s and 60s and you put it on the internet, I got to tell you, I think it'll work. And but you can't just have just anybody do it. There've got to be people that are passionate and want to do the right thing, do it the right way. But you've got to be focused and stick to the brand so that you're not. People need to know that that's what you do. That's where I go. That's where I find out. That's my trusted source for local news. Is on, maybe it's on Facebook, maybe it's on my phone, and I've got video of an accident. I've got video of some big thing that, like, water main breaks seem to be really, in vogue this winter.
What you just alluded to were these guardrails, and that guardrails were the news director or the Beacon Journal, the editor, that put those, that looked at every piece of content before it went out and said, does this, what you just described, does this fit into our branding, how we do things here, and does it, and would stop and not take away anything from citizen journalists or media as it exists now.
Right.
Those guardrails don't exist to keep you on brand.
Right. Is it in the community interest? And what is your community? Like, if I put up something about the Vice President of the United States about to have a child, like somebody did that locally on a site that does sort of does news kind of, and I wrote him and I said, what does this have to do with Akron? I mean, first of all, you don't congratulate people when you do news. That's not you don't do that. Like, if you want people to know right away that you don't know what you're doing, do that. And then they'll know that's not news, right? And you have to take the brickbats. You've got to do it, and you don't make excuses. You don't talk about how hard the job is. Just do the news and see what happens, right? And have some people driving around with cameras, and they've got somebody doing that now on Facebook, and I think they got really close to having a really successful formula, and then they kind of went. I don't want to say they got greedy. They just kind of went off in a bunch of different directions, and now they do polling and they do national news and look, people can get that anywhere. You've got to give people something they can't get anywhere else. One of our real secrets to success was the sportscasts on 23. What we did was we decided we're going to show people's children and grandchildren on the news. Yeah. When we covered Friday night sports, we only showed a little bit of the games. The camera guys panned the crowd.
Audience. Families.
And then you say over the loudspeaker, go home and watch the news tonight, and you might say, right?
I was part of this. I'm
yes,
in a news thing where I am, we watched it at home. We saw the TV-23 cameras at the Stowe 4th of July parade in 1980, whatever, and we go home that night to watch, and sure enough, we made the cut, and I can remember being on. I thought, that's where it started. So, and it's like, I was on TV.
And if you do it every day, eventually, everybody gets on TV.
Everybody in Akron has been on TV at least once.
Right? Theoretically, right?
Akron is lucky to have you, that you stayed and you did all kinds of things to serve the community in so many different roles. I'm fortunate that you would take the time to come on. I could, we're out of time. I could talk another hour on this. I could pick your brain for days as the unofficial consultants. We won't say that title on the air. We'll edit that part out. Mark Williamson has been our guest, and absolutely sincere when I say how fortunate we are to have him willing to come on to our program and share with us just a little glimpse on what TV-23 was when they had a nightly newscast back in the day, and all of our ideas for what it could be in the future. Perhaps someday it could happen. Certainly all of us passionate about Akron, local television news, local journalism, and certainly want to build TV station that serves you, our viewer, in the spirit of true traditional television broadcasting. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being a part of the WAOH audience, and have a good night.